Hey, welcome to the Sweet Home Texoma podcast. This is your trusted guide through the journey of buying or selling a home. Home ownership has become increasingly challenging, especially for first-time buyers, and that's really why I started this podcast, to provide clear information, some expert advice, and step-by-step understanding of the home buying and selling process. For first-time buyers, having a solid plan is essential, and today we're diving into one of the most important and often overlooked parts of the home buying process journey: what happens after a purchase contract is signed. This phase is known as the contract to close process, and it's where legal transfer of ownership takes place. It involves a lot of moving parts, verification of property information, and lots of money. In fact, buying a home is often the largest financial decision many people will ever make. And that's why being informed and having a strong, experienced team to help is absolutely critical. Today, I'm joined by two experts in their field that are involved in the contract to close journey. Sonya Smith is an escrow officer with Independence Title. Welcome, Sonya. And Dan Hansen is a loan officer with Property Home Mortgage. So welcome, Sonya and Dan. It's great to have you with us today. So Sonya, let's start with you. It's great to have you with us today. How would you explain what an escrow officer does to a new acquaintance?
Thank you for having me on. I do appreciate the opportunity. An escrow officer facilitates the closing. We make sure we're a neutral party in the whole transaction, and we make sure that all the timelines are met that's within the contract and the terms between all parties.
Okay. And Dan, hey, it's great to have you back. We had a previous episode where we dove into pre-approval and how important that is and different loan options and so forth. Same question to you. How do you explain your role as a loan officer at Property Home Mortgage to a new acquaintance?
Thanks for having me back. It's great to be here. Yeah, once a buyer's under contract, my main role is to guide them through the loan process all the way to the closing table. That means staying in close contact, making sure everything runs smooth, from either locking their interest rate to working with the underwriter, handling appraisal, helping them to understand what to expect at the closing table. I'm also there to answer questions and, solve problems. And one of the biggest things is to stay in good communication with everyone within the contract to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, 100%. Well, you both play key roles in the contract to close process. And I'd really like to get right into that. The contract to close, the critical phase of the home buying process. It's often not well understood, especially by first-time home buyers. So, once a purchase contract is accepted, things start to move very quickly. One of the first steps for the buyer is to deposit earnest money. It's kind of a good faith payment that shows the seller you're serious about completing the purchase. Most contracts also include an option period, which gives the buyer time to inspect the property for issues that maybe weren't obvious during the initial walkthrough, material issues. And we'll get into what that process looks like in working with a home inspector in a future episode. So today we're going to pick up to the point where a contract is signed, and perhaps there are things happening on the inspection process, but there are important things that are happening with the loan and with the title company, and we'll get right into that. So to break down the contract to close process, we've got our two experts with us today. And we can start with you, Sonya. Explain what it means to do title research and handle escrow and coordination at the title company. Can you walk us through some of that?
I sure can. Once the contract is signed, it is actually the agents will send a copy to the title company, and then the buyer's agents will send a copy to the mortgage company. That way we're all on the same page and we have the same contract. Once the contract's received in at the title company, we do receipt in the contract acknowledging that it was received, and we send that out to all parties. At that point is when we start opening title. We'll go ahead and issue the contract to the title plant. They will start the research on that part of it, and then what they do is they search all of the county and the area that the property is located in to see if they can find any liens, anything that's going to cause issues down the road before closing, because that's part of what we do. We insure the property and we make sure that we have a clear title for the new buyers once we get to the closing table.
And Dan, as far as where it picks up with the lender, I know we talked about pre-approval, but pre-approval is not applying for the loan actually. So maybe you can pick up from that step in the process where we've got a signed contract and the buyer is ready to apply for the loan.
Yeah. So now that we have an executed contract, just to summarize everything and not make this a 30-minute video, our first step is to get everything updated on the buyer's loan application per the contract, and then just make sure that we have all the necessary documentation from the buyer and as accurate as possible on their loan application. So then next, I submit the full loan package over to underwriting for review. But behind the scenes, my team and I are verifying things like the buyer's credit, income, assets, employment, making sure that the appraisal gets ordered as soon as possible, and a lot more stuff. But once underwriting has gone through everything on the file with a fine-tooth comb, they let us know if there's any additional documentation or information that they'll need to give us our final loan approval. And then from there, it's all about preparing for closing. So reviewing the final numbers with the buyer, helping to get the funds over to the title company, and just making sure that the buyer is 100% ready for that big day.
One of the things that's super important is the property appraisal. And I know, an appraisal might come in low. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the appraisal, how important that is, and what happens if that is the case.
No, it's super important and a great question. Yeah, if the appraisal does come in low, which means that basically the value on the appraisal is coming back under what we have for the contract sales price. So there's a little bit of a difference in value between the appraised value and the contract sales price. So there's a couple of different options at that point for the buyer. The buyer can pick up and just walk away from the home if they can't come to terms on that difference. And for the most part, they would receive their earnest money back. The buyer can actually cover the difference at closing, and basically they would just add whatever that amount is to their total cash to close. Another is buyer and seller can negotiate and renegotiate to see if maybe they can drop the sales price to offset that difference and be more in line with what the appraised value is coming back at. And then lastly, the buyer can request a reconsideration of value, which basically means we go back to the appraiser and say, hey, maybe you didn't have all the information when doing the appraisal. Provide them with some information that might change the value, hopefully to match the contract sales price.
That's super important. On the contract side, a financing addendum is what gives the buyer the right to make sure their financing can be obtained and that there's not an issue with the mortgage loan. We talked last time about loan to value and some of those important concepts in the loan. So it really is an important construct in the contract to protect the buyer from being able to get the loan they need to purchase the property. And it's also important on the lender side as well to understand what money is being lent and is the property aligned with that amount, right? It's super important. Yeah. So Sonya, let's talk a little bit more about title and title insurance. Title examination and title insurance might sound like a boring topic to some folks, but it's really, really important. It's a big deal.
Is.
And maybe you can kind of explain that, why it's important and what it involves.
Well, title work begins with the company or the title plant. They check the public records and they check if the seller really owns the property, if the property has more than one owner, or if, we have dead people in title. And then if they are passed away, do we need to go and do research even further to see if they had a will and if it was probated? There's a lot of things that come into check here that we have to do. And like we check for unpaid taxes, claims against the property. If there's any AJs out there, which is abstracted judgments against the parties, if there's any federal tax liens, anything that's going to cloud the title, that's going to keep the buyer from purchasing the property or causing any issues moving forward at this time.
And how does title insurance come into play?
Once they purchase the property, owner's title policy is issued, and that's going to cover them from any issues that may arise from past clients. Anything that the title company might have missed from our title search or exam, the title insurance is going to protect that current owner from any past judgments or anything that might arise after the fact of them purchasing the property. The lender's title policy is going to cover them on their side of things for against the loan or any property, any liens or anything that comes up against the property as well. So it's always important for the owner and the lender to have the title insurance.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
And a thing about the title commitment I would like to say is there's ABCs of the title commitment. And this is one thing that people, they don't understand is your ABCs. It stands for Schedule A. This is going to be your actual facts. This is going to be who, what, where, and how much. It's going to tell you who's purchasing the property, who owns the property, who the lender is, and how much they're obtaining the loan for, and how much the owner's title policy is going to cost. And then you have Schedule
Right.
B, which is for buyer notification. It just tells the buyer out there on the title commitment what utility easements are out there, because that utility easements give the city they own part of the land where they can come in and make any adjustments to. When I say easements, I'm talking about utility easements like your electrical, your gas, anything like that. It gives them the rights to come onto the property to make any repairs or anything like that that need to be taken care of in the past or in the future. And then Schedule C is clear to close. What this is, these items must be resolved before we even get to the closing table, because we have to ensure that the title is clear for the new owners. And this would include such things as mortgages being paid off, marital status. Say that you have divorced couples, and if they're divorced, then we have to go back and go through their divorce to make sure we have all the proper deeds in place, that everybody's signed off accordingly. If there's any home improvement liens, any unpaid taxes, if everybody that's required to sign is present and alive and is able to sign, if we have any heirs or former spouses or anything like that, we have to make sure that we have all of that clear before we get to the closing table. And then Schedule D, all it does is it just closes. It gives you an outline of all the parties and what all is going to be collected and what part's going to be insured and the premiums and all of that. So most people, when they look at a title commitment, they get scared because they don't really understand what that is for and what it does. And it's just, in general, it's just showing what's going to be taken care of before you even own the property.
Prevents surprises. It uncovers any rights that someone might have to a property, whether it's an easement or a claim through some past, legal claim. So it's super important to understand that before you get those keys and you move into your home.
People, when they are buying a house, especially first-time home buyers, they're so scared because this is a big purchase and it's a big investment for them, and they're excited and scared at the same time. And that's why it's always important to have a great team behind you. Have a realtor that, understands, and then have your lender that understands as well and is going to walk you step by step and hold your hand through this whole transaction. It makes a big difference in the team that you have working with you during this process.
Yeah, absolutely. Super important. And not only making the process a little smoother, but if there are problems or issues that crop up, whether, on the inside, if there's an appraisal that comes in low, or on the title side, if there's some sort of an encumbrance, getting those things resolved quickly and efficiently really at times requires a strong team, people who can understand the issues and then take the appropriate steps to resolve those. So, closing day can be exciting. It can be overwhelming. I always prep my clients with a checklist of what to expect, but I'm sure each of you has some advice for viewers. What are a few key things that you would like folks to know about and help them come prepared for closing day? So maybe Dan, start with you.
So prior to the closing date, I'll send the buyer over the final numbers, kind of go over everything with them, answer any questions they might have so that when they do show up on their closing date, they know what's going on. They're not in the dark. But I have to say that they should bring their pen and be ready to sign a lot of closing docs at the actual closing table. But, they shouldn't worry. Like, they'll always have somebody there that can answer questions or go into more detail on anything at the closing table for those closing docs. So, but, once they've powered through that and got everything signed, both them and the seller, once they've signed both sides of the closing documentation, we release the funds to title, and then the buyer gets their keys and they got their new home. So it's exciting.
What do you see with buyers, especially maybe first-time buyers? What would be some advice or some tips to help them come prepared and
I
confident?
think just walk in there and just have fun. Just be excited because you made it to this point. You're at the finish line here. You're about to sign your documents and you're going to be a first-time homeowner. And it's so exciting. And we try to make it as happy experience as we possibly can, because this is, for first-time home buyers, this is a big step for them. And then even if it's for people that are relocating or individuals that are sizing down, if you have a seller that sold their house because it's too big, it's just them empty nesters, and then they're sizing down, that's even a bittersweet moment for them as well, because you have to take in consideration their feelings, because that house is probably their home where they brought home their children and it's their first home together, and now their kids have moved on and they are stepping down to a smaller house. So it's a experience for everybody. And so I just recommend just come in with a smile on your face, be prepared to have fun, because we're going to make it exciting for you. We're not going to just have it boring sitting there quiet at closing. We're going to have a fun excitement closing. It's going to be happy. It's going to be good times.
Absolutely. Navigating this whole process can be confusing and stressful, but as we've said, with the right team involved, the path's smoother, interests are better protected, and there's nothing like the experience of getting to that finish line and getting your keys in your hand to your new home. So, Sonya, Dan, I'm sincerely grateful for your time today. You've provided a wealth of good information to our viewers. Thank you for being with us. It's been my honor. To our viewers, thank you for viewing today. I hope this was valuable. Please share this with a friend if you found it helpful. Subscribe to this channel. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And certainly, if I can be of any assistance with you with a real estate need, contact me through my website or email with the contact info on the screen for myself as well as Dan and Sonya. Thank you again. Thanks for watching.